and I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat. They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
We may not know what exact day it is, but we know that today is New Year's Eve, and we are live. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast, the final podcast of 2022. And probably if you're listening to on New Year's Day, your first podcast of 2023. We hope that's the case. We hope you also follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, Twitch.com Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network, as we are here we're going to talk a little Canucks. We're going to talk a little Flames. We're going to talk about hot dogs. We're going to talk a whole bunch of different things. A bit of very interesting little holiday week here. But Sean, do you know what day it is?
No, I haven't worked all week, and I have no idea what actual day of the week it is. I know it's New Year's Eve, but oh man, this past week is. I think I learned a new term to call this week: Crimbo Limbo. Which I think, you literally like you wake up if you're not working. Like there's a lot of us that don't work between Christmas and New Year's, and you wake up after every day feels like Saturday, every day feels like Sunday, every day feels just like you're like I as much as I've enjoyed my time off, I am ready to get back into the routine and feel productive again.
Yep.
Tyler, go ahead. Yeah. Hello,
yeah.
Tyler.
So it's Saturday. I have been working between Christmas and New Year's, and those of us in the road maintenance business don't get too much time off at this time of year, unfortunately. But we had a winter storm that spanned Christmas Eve into Christmas Day, then freezing rain right after that. So I've kind of been working and then getting some days off kind of in between. So it is still a bit of a confusing state here as well. But Saturday for a New Year's Eve, and great to be with the two of you talking hockey today.
I worked Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So, so I guess I have a one up on all of you. Not that I cared, but talking about the roads, I'm well aware of the roads. We had two potholes on the ironworkers this week. So, that was fun. We had a few other potholes as well. Yeah, with the storms. Wasn't as bad as that fateful November night, though, but still just it was a crazy couple weeks on the roads for sure. I can assure you that was
you got into the traffic reporting business on a fun occasion, I guess.
Yes, it's been peak traffic, for sure.
Boring.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
But we're off now. It's okay. We're getting ready for 2023. If you have any questions, any comments, we'll get into that. Canucks Flames are playing tonight, and we'll start. Let's start with the Canucks here, and I guess they're. I'm trying to remember I can't remember what happened in the last Canucks game. Okay, so they beat the Oilers before Christmas. They lost to the Jets. Yes, that's of course, everyone talking about the crossbar game. I don't want to talk about that. I just think it's a non-issue to me. People, it's called the game of hockey. People have emotions in it. You're paid millions of dollars. That's all I'll have to say about that. But and kind of looking back of the year, kind of thinking about the stories of the year, the play and the growth of Pettersson is one of the stories of the year in Vancouver. And I think that for and I think we've talked about this a lot here on this podcast, for a fairly negative overall perception of this team, this has been one of the big bright spots of this team. And it's really been not only, I would argue this has been the year 2022. I wouldn't argue it's been the season. I think he took a step this year, but I think overall, just the player and the person of Pettersson, since Bruce Boudreau took over, I think that has been a massive story. And of course, I think there'll be obvious reasons of why it will be a story in 2023 and going forward because of course, contract conversations, but just his play, I think has to be considered one of the stories of the year in Vancouver.
Definitely probably the best of the stories. There's not been a lot of great ones, unfortunately. A lot of off-ice turmoil and change and not much progress in the standings and a lot of talk about salary cap space and roster construction and who might be staying, who might be going. But yes, Petey has been making great progress, and especially lately too. Just all aspects of the game are looking good right now, and you hope it stays that way.
Yeah, what Petey has done since having that slump to start the 21-22 season off is he's really, that slump I think has made him a better player. He understands that, and he's in the process. To me, he's in the process of becoming your prototypical number one center, 200-foot point producing player.
Yeah.
The guy that you are going to build your forward group around for years to come. And they know that, and they will make, and as much as we had the JT Miller trade talks and contract talks this past year, going into 2023, we will have the Bo Horvat trade talks and contract talks. I don't think it's going to get any remotely close to having to deal with that at all with Pettersson. I think they get that deal done in the summer, and I think it will be a long-term 8-year deal, and that he deserves every single penny of it. He's someone who has, despite having that slump for the calendar year of 2022, he's led the Canucks in 5-on-5 scoring 49 points in 80 games. The closest is JT Miller at 44 points in 82 games, and that's what JT. So that's something that also we can get into a little bit later. That's with JT having an absolutely horrendous start point production wise, 5-on-5 this season. So, I think we're seeing the evolution of Petey to the next level. To that. There's a lot of talk about Nico Hischier getting into the Selke conversation. I bet you if the Canucks can figure out how to be a more competitive team and have a better defensive team all around, Pettersson gets into that conversation as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I said if the Canucks, I've said this a few times, if the Canucks were a better team, I think Petey is in both conversations. I think he's also would be in the Hart conversation for me as well. And to me, yes, you can look at when he scores points or he scores points and whatever, but I think just in terms of the all-round game, he's got to be he's got to be in the lower, in the one finger, or at least in your fingers, top 10, what I mean, all-round centers in the game right now, just in terms of what he's played. And it's kind of unfortunate because I think, for those who don't watch the Canucks, you're going to look at the stats, you're going to look at the goals against average, you're going to look at penalty killing, you're going to look at a number of other issues, and that's going to disqualify Pettersson. But he should be in that conversation. And if you're going to put Nico Hischier in that conversation, I get it, but the Devils have not exactly been lighting it up the second half of the first part of 2022, if that makes any sense. They've kind of been stumbling around. So if you're going to keep Nico Hischier in the conversation, I definitely think it's worth keeping Pettersson in the conversation for me in terms of those. But so, and yeah, I mean, I'm probably a future conversation. This looks like a guy that you can put a C around on an actual, as Dan says, not the C on the stomach, but the little C on the actual, on the heart there for the captain. I mean, I think that that's a pretty obvious thing to me. And then when management says, or according to Elliot Friedman, and I think just to be cautious there, how I word this, the only untouchable, one of the only untouchables on the Canucks. I think that just says enough of how you're going to build this team going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to say much about Petey as a future captain when the current guy is still there, but lately I would say Petey's certainly earning that opportunity here as. Just in terms of the overall, just all of it, how long he's been there, his presence on the team, the way he conducts himself, and the setting a good example with his own play, part of it in particular. And Petey can put up points, so it would be a good choice if it comes to making that decision. But we'll see how the rest of the season unfolds here. I guess we're all concluding then there's no way out of a departure of Bo Horvat then at this point.
Outside of some Houdini acts from Albion and Rutherford to find a way to move off of Tyler Myers and maybe some other contracts to open up not only short-term cap space but long-term cap space to make it work for both Horvat and Petey. Yeah. I don't see it. I don't see a way forward with Bo Horvat. Being a Canuck long term, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm 95% certain Bo is not coming back. I still think it's like Sean said. I mean, I think there has to be some. I mean, there'll have to be some other decisions made to keep him. I don't think that Bo is going to give a hometown discount for the Canucks. And I guess it also will depend on where the Canucks are in the playoff circle of what you do with him. But I think realistically, long term,
Kev, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, though. I think it doesn't matter where the Canucks are.
No. What I was going to say, what I was going to say though, this is probably your best opportunity to, at least if you're building something long term, to get something get at least something of real value with Bo Horvat because of the way that he could play in the playoffs. Yeah. I mean, I am still wondering what they do overall with JT Miller. I mean, he does have his no trade clause, and that contract doesn't kick in until next year.
But who's taking that on, Kev?
I don't know.
That's what's so scary.
Every time you bring this up, I'm like, I understand that, but who's taking that contract on?
Well, and he does himself no favors either with the way he plays, like,
and the way he acts.
I know you don't want to bring up the chopping the crossbar thing, but like, who's interested in bringing that into their fold right now?
Well, yeah.
If they hadn't signed that contract and he was on a 1-year deal going into playoffs, we'd probably be talking. We wouldn't be talking about Bo Horvat potential trade because they would have signed him long term. But you've got he'd be a lot more palatable of an acquisition as opposed to the rest of this season and then $8 million for another 7 after this.
What a mess.
Yeah, it is a messy. But all I'm saying is there. I mean, I'm doing the Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance. I'm saying it's still possible that they have the option if someone is willing to take the contract to trade JT Miller because he does not have a no.
But also, what's the cost of them taking on that contract? Because it's not going to be a JT Miller for a few assets. It's going to be JT Miller and assets for lesser assets. And the Canucks aren't in a position to do that. That's why it makes no sense. And as much as you're trying to be Lloyd Christmas here, Kevin, there's no realistic chance that the Canucks are going to be able to trade JT Miller and that future contract for anything that makes them better, both short term and long term. Unless we're talking about just unless you're the first major move that this new management team did is a failure.
Yeah, they're going to do the about face on the JT Miller deal. I don't see that.
Well, okay, just to counter that, just for a little bit. I mean, I know just from a PR perspective. Okay, I'm with you. I don't see it happening from a PR perspective, though. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But the other side of this is if you're management and you're generally seeing the overall performance, sans the crossbar thing, just take the crossbar thing away. This is, and I'm a JT Miller. I'm a JT Miller guy. This has not been a good year for JT Miller, especially defensively. He's been horrendous. I don't think there's any other argument or any other way to say it. This contract, the signing of JT Miller as a contract cannot be looked at. It has to be looked overall as a failure. So they're damned right now if they do, and they're damned if they don't. And this was their second major move. I guess you could argue their first major signing was Brock Besser, but the one that everybody is talking about, the contract that everybody's talking about, is the JT Miller contract. So it's hard.
I disagree there, Kev. I still think it's the first major decision they made. Brock Besser was an RFA, and the way with everything, you look at the contract, the qualifying offer. They weren't going. The only way that decision from them about Brock Besser would have been major is if they walked away from him because of that qualifying offer.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, the move that is, so I mean, okay, the major move, the move that has made the statement is the JT Miller contract, and it cannot be looked right now as of December 31st. As we head into 2023, this cannot be looked like a successful signing in any way of how the perception, no matter what you think the Canucks management intention was, the fact that they did not sign Bo Horvat and they signed JT Miller, that has to be looked upon as a failure. I don't see any other way to look at it.
I mean, it's still I think it's still too early. JT Miller could have a shit year this year and then come back and be the guy he was last season for the majority of that contract, or for at least half of that contract. And then you're looking at it as maybe a saw off. Depending on what you get for Horvat.
You wonder too. I think what coaching, like, is that going to be different next year? Like, there's a whole lot of unknowns about next year.
When you make the decision to move off of a JT Miller and pay another team to take him on, you've cut your losses and run. Yeah. Here, there's still potential, and JT Miller is still a talented enough player to turn this around and make it at least palatable, as opposed to right now, which is a complete failure.
Yeah.
At least that's how the perceived perception of it is. So if you're going to make that move, and then imagine that, Kev, they make the decision that this isn't working. We're going to pay someone to take JT Miller's contract. So they pay most likely a first, because that's it's going to take, at least something that hefty to make it happen. Then JT Miller goes on, helps that team be successful, and is a top line forward. That's even more of a disaster, more of a failure on that than just sticking with it and seeing what happens.
Mm-hmm.
They've made that commitment to JT Miller. So unless JT Miller comes to them and says, I want to trade, they aren't trading him.
No,
you're right. I mean, ultimately, it still would be JT Miller's decision, but it's still it's the 1% option. I mean, I
think it's
think
0.5%, honestly.
well, it's in the 1%. It's 1 or lower. But I guess we'll see what happens overall with JT Miller. I mean, there's the other question. I mean, the other elephant in the room in Vancouver is the future of Bruce Boudreau. What's going on with that? And that I think is a very interesting question going forward. I think
Can I pose a question about that though?
Sure.
Is that more of an issue in the media and the fan base than it is within the team and management?
Well, no, it is a question only because this is his final year of his contract, so that it does become a question of what you're going to do.
It does, but how, like, in terms of how quickly they make that move?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they.
I feel like they don't. Sorry,
let me finish. They won't make the move I don't think if they were going to make the move, I think they would have made the move already. I think they're going to finish the year with Boudreau. That's kind of the way that I see it.
I think so too.
But
it's either that or after the trade deadline. At or around the trade deadline, depending on where they're sitting and what happens at the deadline, because you've got Horvat, Kuzmenko are your two big trade ships potentially. If you can find a way to move, if they can resurrect Connor Garland and Brock Besser, they become potential assets as well, because they've got Besser's got 2 years left. Garland's got 3 years left. That's more long-term money off the books. That's going to help the Canucks sign Petey and potentially Horvat if that comes to pass. But let alone they have got a decision with Ethan Bear. But yeah, I don't think we see a Bruce Boudreau move until at least the trade deadline.
Yeah.
If not just like, sorry, Bruce, didn't work out. Thanks for putting in a whole season's worth of effort. We're moving on.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of where this team is, because I think there's at least a section of the fan base that is looking forward into what the future is. I mean, I think that the question of where Boudreau moving forward and who the next coach is not immediate, but it is going to eventually, just as I think about 2023, going to be a question. That's all I would say.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. So, but I also think there's been some bright spots with the Canucks this year too. I mean, I think it's really, I mean, most of the focus has always been kind of, a high majority of it has been on the performance and antics of JT Miller. But Ilya Mikheyev has been a really, and I think that part of what has helped Pettersson has been the style of play that Mikheyev brings. I know the Leafs are playing really well right now, but I would still argue that the Leafs are, when the playoffs come, are missing what, and will need to find what Ilya Mikheyev brings in order to be successful. And I do think he's been a great winger for Pettersson, and he's been a great find overall for the Canucks. I think he's been I don't call him the unsung hero, but I think he's been the Swiss Army knife of the Canucks this year in terms of what he's been able to bring to the team this year.
He's been someone who you can put on a line and helps them be a more direct north-south line, which has been an absolute, that's been one of the biggest issues that the Canucks are trying to work through, is the fact that you've got players playing too much east-west, not being direct, not being willing to play, to just grind it out and cycle the game, play the cycle game. And because of that, they're playing with the puck high in the zone and giving up odd man rushes. That's what cost them the game against Winnipeg. As much as we lauded the praises of Petey, he made a mistake and tried to dangle someone in the neutral zone when he should have played a little more conservatively. It made Travis Dermott take a penalty because he was caught flat-footed, and they scored, and then the Jets scored on the power play, and that was the end. That basically was the turning point of the game. So if they can find a way to become more north-south, play less between the top of the circles and the blue line when they're in the offensive zone, that's going to create more success for them short-term and long-term. And Ilya Mikheyev is a player who just plays in direct straight lines to the net. And it creates havoc for the opposition, and it creates opportunities for his line mates.
Yeah, he's been a great addition. There's so much talk around JT Miller, Bo Horvat, his contract status. I mean, Andrei Kuzmenko. The Kuzmenk show. That's what we call it, the Kuzmenk show. I mean, that's man, they got to find a way to keep him around for a long time.
That's the other thing is which is another reason why I'm like, unless they're able to find someone who's willing to take on some long-term cap. Yeah. Besser, Garland, Myers has 1 year left.
Yeah.
To a point that they can find a way to. It's going to be really tough. But also another reason why I think Bo Horvat's gone is because I think you've got Petey, who's going to be your number one center. You've got JT Miller, who can play center, even though he struggled this year. He's shown that he can play center. Yeah. As long as he's not like the switch that they need to make, though, is to have Petey be the more hard match against the top line center as opposed to JT Miller.
Yeah.
Let him learn that. I think Petey's ready for that. And that's the one switch I want to see in 2023 from the Canucks. And then if and when the Bo Horvat move is made, that'll open enough cap space up for them to sign Kuzmenko long term.
Yeah, it's not just the production; it's just like just the fun that he has. It's just like it's infectious. It's fun. It's fun watching it. I think it lightens the mood around that team, which has been a lot of bad news and a lot of failure. So I think that's been nice. I think you see that too with them. Like, who's not excited for a Kuzmenko goal celebration, right?
He reminds me of Jesse Puyarvi in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like on that
does.
team, is there anybody having more fun than him?
Yeah.
They were great last night too, by the way. The Oilers absolutely hammered the Kraken.
Yeah.
Yeah, some guy named Mac David, 5 points. Mick something or other. Yeah. Kuzmenko he's also been a bright light. And I also think Ethan Bear has been a really solid pickup overall for on defense. I think he's brought some stability to the right side. I mean, it's not a spectacular right side. We all know the weaknesses on the defense, but I think he's found a home. I think he's taken what he's learned from Carolina. He's brought that to his game here, and I think he's a guy that you can put in all situations. Is he the best right shot defenseman in the league? No, but it is an upgrade. So, and I think that's been a good thing as well. And I've been generally impressed with Ethan Bear.
For player acquisitions, if you're looking for a bright spot with this team, and despite the sort of running on a treadmill, not going anywhere feelings, I would say that the player acquisitions that this management team has made, for the most, other than maybe Riley Stillman, and that move was a little more complex than just acquiring Riley Stillman, they've been really good. I think you look at Neil Zaman, he got sent down to Abbotsford, but he's been a good fourth liner for them this season. You look at Ethan Bear, been a good acquisition. Lane Peterson stepped in and found money in that trade when all they gave up was a third. You've got Mikheyev, Kuzmenko. Dermott, when he's healthy, has been good.
Yeah.
I honestly look at that and it makes it. That's where I feel a little more confident with the future of this team, even though they haven't made any drastic big roster shakeup moves just yet. I think they're trying to be patient so that they don't make a mistake that in terms of trading away someone they haven't made any big roster shakeup moves just yet, but the players that they have brought in have been positives for the most part.
Yeah, it's just, so incremental, I guess, that and it's been so long without any real contending that there's going to be this feeling around it being not enough. But, to do anything really major is going to happen in the offseason. And I think we'll see a coaching change and then some fairly significant roster changes all happen during the offseason. But during the rest of the deadline. The deadline will force certain moves. But right now everybody's kind of on audition here to hold on to a spot or maybe get an opportunity somewhere else by earning it with some good play here in the next couple of months.
But I was
just going to say, I mean, that's assuming that there's no playoff chase here.
Yeah, I guess that's the ultimate question is do they keep them? I mean, they're 6 points out now. Do they keep themselves into the playoff race or not? I guess that's a question. But I also,
but the one thing with that is I know there's that concern and worry that they won't make the trades that are needed even because they're in the playoff race. Yeah. Everything that Alvin and Rutherford have said is that the reason they didn't make the moves last year is because they didn't have anyone who was the one player they did have was Tyler Mott, and they moved him.
Yeah.
That needed to make a decision on. They've got two big choices to make going into the deadline this season with Horvat and Kuzmenko. And everything that this management team has said is that they will not lose players for nothing.
Yeah.
So either those players are getting re-signed or they're getting traded.
Yeah. What I was going to say, and just because a good example of what I'm about to talk about here is the Winnipeg Jets. It's not that you have to make these drastic changes, these massive free agent moves or these massive trades to be successful. I mean, the Jets' key major acquisition, other than the coach, the Jets' key acquisition last year was Sam Gagner. That is one of their key acquisitions last year. They didn't do a heck of a lot in the offseason. I mean, and Gagner played his 1,000th game. So sometimes you make those shrewd little moves, and I think Gagner was a nice shrewd little move. The Jets have made a number of those type of moves. Those types of moves can get you to where you're going and probably help you more than you realize, get you where you're going, as opposed to making the drastic moves like the Flames made with Kadri, Huberdeau, all that. You make these little moves, people aren't paying attention, but those seem to kind of come in the long run. They make more of an impact than people realize.
Well, that, and you also have with the Jets, you also had the bounce back season of Connor Hellebuck.
Yeah,
he was not good last year, and he's been fantastic this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you did get a step up from Josh Morrissey as well.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a sort of a light at the end of the tunnel and hope for the 23-24 season for the Canucks, it's if they can make a few smart moves, and maybe those moves are big, but they can make a few smart moves and build around the P's and Hughes. And I know Hughes wasn't named as an untouchable, but let's remember it's going to take the earth, the sun, and the stars to get him anyways. So he essentially is.
Yeah.
And you get a bounce back season from Demko to playing like he did last season.
Doesn't look so bad, eh?
Yeah, you wouldn't. If the Canucks were getting the goaltender that they got from Demko last season with the scoring that they're getting this season, Where do you think they are in the standings?
Yeah, they're probably in a playoff position, eh?
I think they're battling for
Right
a
there.
division title in the Pacific.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and I don't think that's not something that you can really sustain. And I do think they need to take a little bit of a longer term approach. But they do have the pieces that if they get the goaltending from their top goaltender in Demko, that I think that they still have the pieces to be a playoff team, and they're young enough that they can build off of it with smart moves.
Well, we have to think that that's the thinking of management in a lot of respects, and if they're laying it out in that fashion themselves, then I guess that means there's no chance of a return of Bruce Boudreau next year. Because they're probably going to it's very likely they could get to the end of this season and make the conclusion that one, he's not our guy, and two, he didn't take what should be a better team and get them there.
But
whether that's true or not, or whether that's warranted or not, it could very well be the final conclusion on.
Well, that, and I think that we've already talked about a lot of the sort of the philosophical differences between how Boudreau wants to coach and how Alvin wants the team to be coached. Mm-hmm. The key word there is structure. Boudreau's a little more free-flowing, allowing the players to be more offensively creative, while I think Alvin understands that structure and straight lines are what wins.
Yes.
Yeah. Tyler, we haven't heard from you on this one yet, but where are you on Boudreau? What have your thoughts been of his overall coaching performance? Like, are you sold on Boudreau? Were you at the place where you think it was time for a change? What were your thoughts on that?
Well, when he came in, they needed to make a change, clearly. And they wanted to bring in somebody with NHL experience. So at the time, it was a good move. I mean, he was kind of the one name available out there that sort of ticked all the boxes for what they were looking for. But over time, seeing how just sloppy the team plays on a night-to-night basis, I mean, they can put some games together where there's some good structure and they're managing the puck well, but it's not there all the time. And then when he's in the media saying he doesn't understand why it's like that, it kind of it leaves me feeling a little underwhelmed with him. I don't have a better option off the top of my head right now, but he's a pretty veteran coach, and he's got a team that's lacking some hockey maturity, and I don't know if he's able to get that straightened out. He's probably not the right guy for that.
Yeah, I like him as a human. I think that this has been a combination of both probably coaching and just an overall lack of maturity on the team, too. So, yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of with you in terms of I think it's I don't see him coming back next season, but I do think that they'll finish the season with him, and we'll kind of see where. Yeah, I mean, I know this is not the cool thing to say in Canucks podcast media world, but I do think that there's enough to be optimistic about going forward with this team. It's just, I can understand this fan base and this whole frustration with where this team has just been kind of sitting in this mushy middle. I mean, they're 16-3. They're 500 again. It just doesn't really feel like they're making it feels like a lot of people then they're not making any progress. No. That can be frustrating as well. And, and it was an off season. And I think that, the story of the year, I think we would agree is the signing of JT Miller. But I think ultimately the other part of that story is what they didn't end up doing in the off season and just bring in some new blood, new ideas that I think a lot of people were hoping to have happened.
What do you mean new blood, new ideas?
I think they
basically replaced most of that coaching staff.
No, I think that in terms of players, they didn't bring. I mean, yes, they brought in Mikheyev and Lazar, but I don't know if they brought. A lot of people didn't feel that they had, and I'm going to qualify what I'm about to say here. A lot of people didn't feel that they brought in a significant, massive earth change off season that I think
Okay.
a lot of people were hoping.
I think sorry, Kevin, because when you
Okay,
say
just
new
let me
ideas,
finish. Let me finish
Okay.
here, though.
Yeah.
To be fair, a lot of teams didn't have the off season, that kind of drastic off season that everyone wanted, and I don't know if ultimately I come down hard on as hard on Alvin and Rutherford, considering the climate that we are in.
Yeah, it's easy to forget sort of the end of last season too, where late into the season, the final week of the season, there was still the playoff chase happening, and there was this there was hope for next year being a playoff team. People were starting to taste that excitement. I mean, I got to go to the one game late in the season against the Senators, and I mean, it felt like a playoff game, like that. So the idea was to build off that, not to just sort of flush it and start over.
Yeah.
But like you say, Kevin, there wasn't that sort of like, groundbreaking move, to the roster. A big acquisition, with all due respect to the guys that were brought in, not at the same sort of level of acquisition as the Canucks might have been hoping for. And so now it's like all that hope they had people buying there at the end of last season, it's all kind of gone by the wayside.
Yeah, the reason I push back there, Kev, is because when you say new ideas, that to me is management and coaches, which I think they've done a really good job at bringing in new faces in and ideas within there, because we're talking about it. The whole management structure got absolutely redone. Boudreau came back after last season, but they came in. They've got Mike Yeo, Jamie Colleton's in the AHL. They brought up Trent Cull up to the main roster. I think there was enough within coaching and management. Player-wise, yes, they didn't make enough of a splash for the fan base and the media to get on board going into this season. Even though when you look at the teams that did, Ottawa, Calgary, specifically those two, they're still struggling. They're still trying to find their feet.
Yeah, too much change. I mean, I was never that convinced that all the change in Calgary was just going to instantly, be a success. And it kind of went a little unusual from what I was expecting. I thought the very beginning of the season would be, really scary, poor start, and then they'd find it. And they actually kind of started off well, and then sort of lost it, and then kind of got it back, and then they lost it again. So I guess the question there is, is Daryl Sutter long-term the right answer for that group? I guess we're, maybe we're starting to see that could be wearing off, but I'm going on a tangent there.
Well, no, we
that too much change can be the opposite effect too, right? Like that get undecided outcomes there.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you'll just hold on there for a second. When you look at Ottawa, they did make a bunch of drastic changes, but the one thing that Ottawa didn't do was they never upgraded their blue line, really. So I think a lot of people, I still wasn't convinced that they have a bright future on the blue line, but I still don't think that their blue line is strong enough.
Their blue line is very young, though.
Yeah,
they've got Jake Sanderson's in his first full season. Jacob Bernard-Docker's taken a step. You still got Shabbat. Eric Brandstrom's finally looking like an NHL player, even if he is. I still think he's still overhyped by many, but yeah, big moves doesn't always equal success.
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, the Rangers made a pretty. I mean, Vincent Trocheck, that was a signing. I mean, I don't know if it was the earth-shattering signing, but even Florida bringing in Matthew Tkachuk, they're 8 points out of the playoff spot right now. So, it's making those big moves aren't always the big thing. But I think what Jeff Patterson said today was really. I think ultimately, the criticism is they never specifically found a way to upgrade the defense in the offseason. I think that's a fair criticism of management, that they never found a way to do that. But
it is, but it's like, what was out there that was like within their price range?
Yeah, and I
I'm
guess
not sure there was.
the other part of that is, unfortunately, and then, it's good on Travis Dermott that he was able to play his first game of the year against Winnipeg, but that didn't help, right? And that was another little sneaky good acquisition that they made last year at the trade deadline, is getting Dermott for Hamonic, essentially trading Hamonic to Ottawa, getting Dermott from Toronto. And unfortunately, he had a concussion. And there, with stuff like that, you can't criticize management for someone having a concussion. Like, that's hard for me to do.
No, but you can criticize them for not having the necessary depth to overcome an injury like that. There's going to be injuries. It's just how it goes.
That's
and I think they've got it's. I don't think it's the depth that's the issue with this team though. On the blue line, it's outside of Quinn Hughes. Who's your top? Who are players you are comfortable in your top four?
Yeah, they don't really know what they're trying to. I guess you could say they don't really know what they're trying to construct back there.
Well, I wouldn't say they don't know. I say it's just like they're a little hamstrung, like handcuffed.
Yeah.
OEL, I think he's a good 4 now, but he's paid like a top pair guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that handcuffs them on what they can do. Tyler Myers, I think he's a good bottom pair defenseman now, but he's paid like a borderline top pair defenseman.
Yeah.
That's hurting them. So it's when you've got those two players who weren't there, that management team's fault. They weren't they didn't sign them, they didn't trade for them. And they can't offload them. Those cap hits hurt what they can do and how they can improve the team.
Yeah.
And I think what they tried to do, I think, made sense with what the hand that they were dealt. They added Mikheyev, they added Kuzmenko, they added Lazar, they added players up front that could help maybe make them be a more offensive-minded team that could outscore their defensive issues, assuming that Demko was going to be there and playing at a good enough level for them to win games.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Demko's had a bit of a struggle this year, and they haven't been able to outscore him as much.
Just when he was starting to find it, he gets hurt.
Yeah. So I think I understand the criticism. I just think if you look into it more, and the fact that this is a long-term, I do think this management team's taking a long-term approach, because if they were taking a short-term approach, they would have made moves already, like much bigger moves already. They're taking a long-term patient approach to this, knowing that it takes a couple years for these plans to manifest.
Well, and then that gets us back to the discussion of retool, rebuild on the fly, tear down, whatever phrases you want to use. I mean, the tear down, like really deconstruct, takes even longer, with no guarantee of what the new look will do. The teardown could bring you a roster that's not better over a length of time, right? Now, we don't want to live in the what ifs for too long here, but that's the caution. That's the caution.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I mean, and we've seen teams. Really, historically, it's been very rare that a team has said, you know what, we are going to tear. I mean, it's very rare that people have done what Chicago is trying to do. And I mean, Arizona, I don't think I've ever really have felt that there's ever been a true plan overall in Arizona. I think that they've had good players in Arizona, but I don't think that there's ever been a plan. It's very rare, though, that a team an organization has said, you know what, we're going to tear it down and then we're going to rebuild again. A lot of it has been a forced circumstance. And for those that buy into the tankathon, I think you need to all I'm going to say is do your research, because a tankathon has not worked, and there's not been a truly successful tankathon. And the Rangers don't count, by the way, because they got lucky they won a lottery pick, and
even
they
then,
didn't really tear anything. Yes.
And Alex Lafreniere has not been a big piece. He got scratched a couple games ago.
Yeah.
The last game.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the tankathon, which is like trying not to win, but there's also just sort of like methodically deconstructing, moving on from players, clearing cap space, and I think that's the latter that fans are mostly looking for,
Yeah.
as opposed to trying to lose games. But at some point with the whole deconstruction thing, you need the draft position too, right, to start refilling the cupboard, and there's no guarantees with that. Unfortunately, the Canucks, whenever they've had that opportunity to draft first, they've moved down in the lottery.
Yeah,
but even then, they've been able to find players who have been or who are now key parts.
Yes,
they moved down in the draft when they drafted Pettersson. They moved down in the draft when they drafted Quinn Hughes.
Yep.
I think the fan base is just looking for a move that tells everyone that yes, we are looking long term. There hasn't been that move yet.
No, the inaction is like what irritating people, right? It's like do something, But we've seen this before. We saw this with Jim Benning, and we saw it in Edmonton with Peter Chiarelli towards the end. Is that they became like, it's almost like it was speeding up on them. They were making so many moves that it was just like to take his hands off the wheel, like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's there is the thought of, and I hate doing this because it's not this management's team fault, but you take away that OEL trade, they don't have over 11 million, almost $12 million locked up for the next 3 years plus on Garland and OEL, and the handcuffs that this management team have cap wise are a lot less hindrant. So it's that's I think what the fan base and media is clamoring for is a pinpoint move that says this is the plan. We are looking 2, 3, 4 years ahead right now, as opposed to just signing JT Miller long term doesn't really do that, because it's just more of the same.
And no more of this, just like adding a piece here and a piece there, just trying to patch holes and somehow have it sort of coalesce come playoff time. Like, no, they can't. No more of that. A move where, yes, it looks like in the short term the team's not going to be as good, but you can identify how that's going to fit in down the road. And there has not been that with the Canucks.
And you said a key word there, Tyler: identity. The identity of the team. I think that has been another issue overall. When I watch the Canucks, I find them one of the more confusing teams in the league, because I don't know what their identity overall is. I don't know what to expect night in, night out from the Canucks overall.
When they play well, they play that straight line. They're playing a little bit more deeper in the offensive zone, and they're cycling the puck, and that's how they beat Edmonton. And then when they don't play well, that's when they revert back to the cycling high in the zone, forcing plays, forcing passes cross ice, forcing, like, overthinking things, and then next thing you know, the puck's in their own net.
Yep.
And they're like, I feel like we're seeing, and I think you've said this word before there, Tyler, incremental improvements.
Yeah.
But we've reached a point with the media and fan base that incremental isn't good enough anymore.
No, and I mean, I think that the three of us are people that are pretty, like, not overly demanding of the organization in terms of the speed and the manner in which they've tried to improve the team, and we're there too. We're like, no, incremental's not moving the needle for us anymore either. It's like, okay, major change, regardless of what next year is going to look like.
I mean, and I say that with caution. I mean, I know that everybody's watching the World Juniors and are mesmerized, rightly, by the offensive abilities of Connor Bedard, but that is not guaranteeing you a Stanley Cup championship. I hate to tell you that. He's not guaranteeing you anything. I think, not disputing his talent. Please don't get me wrong. We'll get to him in a moment. But that's kind of just, I think, I mean, yes, Connor McDavid has a whole bunch of points, but the Oilers, haven't had a lot of playoff success. They had some last year, but there's still a lot of work to do in Edmonton.
Austin Matthews.
Yep.
Has he won a playoff round?
Yeah.
Nope.
Exactly.
It takes a lot more than just one player. The one issue right now is Connor Bedard is a hometown kid. And that does a lot. Like, just go look at Toronto and how many times they try and bring home Toronto-based, on Southern Ontario-based players. I made a little bit of a joke. Was I think yesterday or the day before on Twitter, using the Spider-Man meme of the two pointing at each other with a Vancouver hockey market and Toronto hockey market, because they're essentially the same now in my eyes. Like, no matter what it is, it's Bedard sets up Guenther for a tap in, which he did a few times already this tournament, and everyone's like, "Oh, look at Guenther! Look what we could have had!" And like, yes, I get it.
It is nice though that the hype machines for a dub player and a Western Canadian based player, as opposed to the it's always usually an Ontario player, it seems like, but. Yes, Bedard would be nice to have, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Let's jump quickly here to the Flames. Here, they are, now things are kind of. It's really, I guess, depends on the day. We're seeing some incremental growth overall with the team. It's been odd in a lot of ways. I don't think anyone had Milan Lucic, Nazem Kadri, and Jonathan Huberdeau as a line on their bingo card this year, but here we are.
I did.
It's
Daryl. Daryl was going to throw
not.
him up there at one point. Come on.
No, I don't think even I, who drinks Daryl's Kool-Aid, would not have had Milan Lucic with Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Huberdeau. But I did expect a slower start from the Flames. And I think I still think there's a lot of growth and a lot of work to do. I still, I think that we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with the Flames. I think the expectations were a little too high in terms of, like, this team is going to roll over everybody. Just prepare for Ron McLean to get out the Stetson hats for the Hockey Night in Canada panel, and we're all going back to the Battle of Alberta again. I just didn't see that. Still not convinced in either way we may see that. I'm not sure. We'll figure that out. But there's some good and bad overall, I think. I think the question, like JT Miller, the polarizing figure in Calgary has been the play of Jonathan Huberdeau, not because of his attitude, but the fact that he doesn't shoot the puck. It was the game in LA. He has the opportunity to shoot, and then he passes it off to Kadri. And I think he knows he needs to shoot a little bit more. But I just think that's a guy that just has got to try to get his game a little bit. He's still working on his game overall.
Yeah. If he's just not quite feeling it, then there's going to be that reluctance to shoot. So I don't know if a mental block is the right way to describe it, but it's almost an attitude. When you're really feeling it, you want to shoot. You're not having that reluctance, right?
I think he's a pass first player. I don't think he's a shoot first. I don't think
he is.
Yeah. I think it's just, and I think he just went with instinct. But even, a lot of people were criticizing that play, but I looked back and watched it. I think it actually was the better play to pass. It's just, it's frustrating because it didn't work out, right? And I think, Tyler, you talked about this. I think the shine on Daryl Sutter in terms of what his decisions on who he plays and who has not been playing, i.e. Matthew Phillips, which I think is the one of the stories here in Calgary, not playing the young local kid. And then you're seeing Milan Lucic at the very least, a top 9 role. Overall, Markstrom has faced some, I would personally think, unfair criticism overall. I think he hasn't been awesome, but I don't think he's been as bad as people have made him out to be in Calgary.
Well, including Markstrom himself. I mean, he's pretty hard on himself with his own comments.
Markstrom's season reminds me so much of the, was it the 18-19 season? or 1920 season before the shutdown,
Yes.
where he would look amazing, but he couldn't. Yeah, he would allow these the first shot goals, and these just like bad goals.
Yeah,
where like it just would ruin otherwise a really good performance.
Yeah, it's like when he was off, it would just be like way off. And then yeah, it's like what is happening? It was so good for so long, and then it's gone.
yeah. Just I think the other things that happened here in Calgary, though, that I think the fall off of Andrew Mangiapane in terms of his overall performance. I mean, he had a really good game in Seattle, but he took a really bad penalty against Edmonton that cost them the game. I don't think he's been up to snuff. I think Kadri has been inconsistent. I think he's still finding his way. And, with Lindholm, he doesn't have the line mates that he had last year. He doesn't. It's not the Gaudreau, Lindholm, Tkachuk line. And this defense wasn't as good as everybody. The blue line specifically isn't as good as everybody has made it out to be. Although I think Rasmus Andersson has made a huge step this year. I think he's a legitimate getting close to a number one type of defenseman in the league. Like, I think he's getting to that. I think he's really, really coming along. But there's been a lot of things. I think the growth of this team, the struggles of this team, I think has put Darryl in a little bit of a hot seat. And I don't know if it's fair, personally. I mean, I think some criticism, some not. I don't know. I just think that this is a team that's trying to grow into a good playoff team instead of being a really good regular season team. I think that's the challenge.
I think I think the chemistry up front isn't good, and I don't think the chemistry in the depth blue line has been good. Well, a lot of that has been within like some depth injuries, and not having an Oliver Shillington has not helped there either. But yeah, Mangiapane and Dylan Dubé have not stepped up. Well, Dubé actually has.
Dubé's been better. Dubé's been better.
The issue is just Mangiapane, 12 5-on-5 points in 37 games. And then they did not get the step up from those players the way they needed after losing two top line players in Gaudreau and Tkachuk. And then Huberdeau has not been good enough. He's got the same amount of 5-on-5 points as Mangiapane. Kadri's been okay. But again, I think the expectations for Kadri were too high. But yeah, I think it's the chemistry's not there, and they are still missing one more piece in that top nine. When you are resorting to Milan Lucic in the top 9, top 6, whatever line, however you want to rank those lines, that's not at this point in Lucic's career. That's not a long-term solution. But I also don't think that anyone has really stepped up to take that role from him.
Yeah. And I think Mackenzie Weegar, it took him a little while, but I don't think he's been bad at all. I think he's been fine.
Weegar's been fine. He is what I expected him to be, which was solid, tough to play against. He wasn't going to be that number one defenseman that everyone thought he could be. But he's, again, I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record here, because I've said this multiple times about this Flames blue line. It reminds me so much of the 2010, 2011 Canucks blue line, where they don't have a true number one defenseman, but they got a bunch of good 2s and 3s. And then that bottom pair is a bit of an adventure at times, I think is a good way of putting it. Mm-hmm. You've got the Flames version of a Chaos Giraffe and Nikita Zadorov. And then Michael Stone's been okay, but I think he's someone who needs more of a steadying. He needs to be the one that's more of the chaos creator on a bottom pair, as opposed to being the safe player. So I don't necessarily like that match, but I also don't know if either of them are good enough to step up into a top 4 role.
Stone is a chaos puppy. What I mean by that is, like, just with his shot, because you don't know where it's going to go. It might hit you in the head. It might hit the goalie in the head. It might hit the glass. It might hit something. But, like, he's chaos. He's a chaos puppy. He just shoots it, okay? He's going to do something and just hope for the best. And Zadorov, yeah, the chaos giraffe, whatever. Yeah, that's an accurate term for him. And, you know, they also didn't, I think, in some ways, they didn't get what they needed from Connor Mackey, or what they were hoping from Connor Mackey. I think the Oliver Shillington was a loss for sure, but I think that they were hoping to get a little bit more than they got from Connor Mackey. I don't think he took the advantage of the opportunity that was given to him.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. But
I think going into 2023, Kev, I think one of the two big questions are, well, actually, the one big question is, what happens with Brad Treliving?
yeah.
He's on his last year of his contract.
Yeah. I think if they win
So you actually think a particular playoff result is going to...
I think playoff result will have something to do with it. But I also think Daryl will have something to do with it. I think if Daryl goes, I think Brad will go. That's kind of, and I mean, they did sign Daryl to a contract. But there's a little part of me that wonders if I could have a bold prediction. I wonder if there's a part of ownership that wouldn't mind seeing Daryl put on the GM hat, which would be dumb.
I don't see Daryl wanting to do that, though. I suppose if you throw enough money at him, he would, but...
I would argue that Daryl has more influence on the ownership than Brad Treliving. Just historically.
Yeah.
Just because where he's from. The Flames organization have always loved the Sutters. And I kind of think that they have more power than what Brad does. That's the one thing that just... and I would rather see Daryl coach than Daryl GM, but there's a part of me that wouldn't be surprised if I see it. I mean, that's, maybe I'm being Lloyd Christmas again in terms of, like you're saying, there's a chance, but I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, if the Flames don't make the playoffs or go out in one round, I don't know what happens. I'm pretty sure Brad's gone, but I don't know what the replacement plan would be.
Yeah.
No, I don't take this the wrong way, because I think Brad's been a pretty steady, effective executive, but it's been there a long time as it is. Like, it's amazing that he's been able to kind of overcome a few playoff misses along the way to this point. So I don't know. I don't have a good feel for where Flames ownership is at, or where the higher levels of the Flames organization is at in terms of, getting impatient for some kind of a Stanley Cup run here. But I don't know. You look at last year, really not putting up much resistance against Edmonton, then having the offseason with all this change, losing Goudreau for nothing.
I don't think Brad will ever get blamed for that, though. I think Johnny Gaudreau is going to live is the one that will always take the blame for that, not Treliving.
No, but just all of it put together, and then this year with the changes that they've made, and if they don't really kind of take a step, then maybe that is the end of the line for Brad.
Yeah, I think that's the big question. Yeah, I do agree. That's going to be the question of what happens with this team going forward. And I mean, you still have an arena to build. At least we've talked about this in Calgary, at least one arena to build. We've suggested maybe a couple of others, but that's where we're at. I don't know if you guys saw that on Twitter with the Oilers fans in the construction hats were standing dancing about the roof going down.
That was so good. That
was hilarious. Yeah, I wonder, was our friend Graham Moseman there, by the way? I was wondering if
he was not part of that, unfortunately. But he was very happy when he saw it.
Yeah. As one that has demanded the end of the Saddle Dome, I'm with you, Oiler fans, on that one. But I think it's going to be interesting. I still am in an optimistic state with the Flames. I think it's not about finishing first. It's about just building a team that's going to be ready for the playoffs, and I think that's what Daryl's trying to do. And I
Gotta
think
make it first.
you got
Yeah.
it. Well, they're in a wild card spot right now, 1 point ahead of Seattle. So, it's going to be a battle to get into the playoffs. I will grant you that. It's not going to be easy. But
Well, you mentioned Seattle. The fact that they're even part of the picture is complicating things for everybody else.
yeah,
And
No.
the other thing is, like, you've got St. Louis, who's also a very mysterious team, confusing team. They're only 4 points out. Colorado's struggling, but if they get going,
they're getting McKinnon back tonight.
Yeah. So it's but you still got to make it, and all right. So if they don't make it, and you're building it for a playoff team, but you can't even make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And the Kraken currently have 3 games in hand on the Flames.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I guess we'll see where the Kraken are overall at. Are they fading? I still think they're I think that they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot.
They're falling off a little bit, but I think they'll stay in the hunt. But you're going to have, I think, depending on what the Canucks do, is going to be interesting. Nashville and St. Louis are teams that I think are going to be in the hunt too. So
yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, the other team that is mysterious here in the Western Conference, and I'm curious about, is what about the Kings? Because they're actually being outscored here, 134 to 130, yet they're sitting at 21-12-6 at 48 points and in second place. So I don't know if that goaltending holds up. I think that's going to be an interesting question in LA. Mm-hmm. So I wonder about them. And I don't, and I think the two mystery teams to me, Vancouver and St. Louis, are mysteries to me, but I still think the Oilers are a bit of a mystery to me overall. I don't know,
maybe where they've always been a mystery, but I'm like, I know what they are.
they're a team that relies on McDavid and Draisaitl, and if it wasn't for the performances of McDavid and Draisaitl, I think that you would have to put the Oilers as one of the disappointments of the year. I mean, they've been better the last little bit. They're kind of in the same flame mode, but I don't think that, I think if you sat Oiler fans down and said, do you like where you are right now? I don't know if you're super happy.
There'd be some degree of unease, you would think, or maybe not total panic, but
no depth scoring. The big goaltending signing of the offseason is now your de facto 1B at this point. So yeah, it's still wide open, but yeah, there's still a lot of teams that have blaring issues.
Yeah. Does Vegas's goaltending hold up?
Who knows?
I mean, that's just unproven more than anything else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I mean, Dallas, Winnipeg, Minnesota, I could argue right now I would rank them 1, 2, 3 in the Western Conference at this point. I could make that argument. I mean, Dallas has been really strong this year. Minnesota's starting to get it together. And Winnipeg's looked pretty good overall. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see where everybody is at here. Mm-hmm. In terms of that, anything else on the Canucks and Flames we need to bring up?
Just one a name to look out for, potentially to replace Boudreau, is Ricard Grönborg. He got he's Sweden. He was coaching with the ZSC Lions in the Swiss League. Told them that he wasn't going to return after this season, so they replaced him with Mark Crawford.
Oh. the
Right.
Crow.
Oh,
Yes.
and one other thing. He did not get a penalty or he did not receive a suspension, but Uyghur's knee/trip McDavid.
Should have been two for tripping.
Not a knee.
Yeah, Kevin's like, I was expecting more.
2 for kneeing, 2 for. It was one of those things. Yeah, I think well, it's just I looked at that and I saw lots of the can't touch McDavid Oiler fans, and I looked at that and McDavid makes those last minute cuts a lot, and sometimes he's going to get caught like that, and that it's not anything dirty, it's not anything malicious or anything like that, but it's just I think it should have been a penalty, 2 minutes, but that's it. I think we've just unfortunately gotten to a point where every time there's some sort of questionable action, there seems to be an outcry for suspensions, and it's just weird to me.
Yeah, I'm having a look at it again here myself. I mean, it in some ways it looks like Connor's trying to get out of the way too, and then when they make contact, it makes it seem worse. So
yeah, well, he makes those last minute cuts.
Yeah,
and also it does make it look worse than it actually is.
On the other side of it, though, it does look like Uyghur's trying to get at least a little piece of him there to slow him down.
But
not in a malicious fashion, though.
You have to you're not you gotta take him out.
I don't look at it like it's a malicious play. You're right. You do have to try to stop him in some fashion. Trying to get away with cheating, essentially, but
I mean that's if you're not cheating, you're not trying. You're not trying,
right?
Accidentally on purpose is a term for a reason.
Yeah, you gotta be physical on McDavid, or he's just gonna roll over you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. I don't know. It kind of. I've had my rant and how dare we touch McDavid? It's in the thing. So So it was a tough day. It was tough on the roads. It was tough. We talked about this, tough on the highways. It was also tough for a number of people taking flights around the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
But the Leafs took a flight a little early to St. Louis and got fined $25,000. $100,000. Sorry. I was reading Sheldon Keefe there.
We'll get to that in a sec.
Yeah. This is sort of where I'm at. I wonder what they do going forward with the Christmas break. Be there's a part of me that wonders if they extend it 23rd, 27th. I don't know. The way I don't see this as a huge issue.
I think they just need to change it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
we know teams practice on Boxing Day anyway. We know that people do that optional skate on Boxing Day. We know this happens. Yeah. So I don't know.
I mean, it's collectively bargained. The players wanted it this way, presumably. It does, but then the league's got to, they got to fix their scheduling. The Leafs can afford that fine. They flew an hour and a half too early, and we're technically traveling on Boxing Day, which is in violation of the collective bargaining agreement. I mean, $100,000 is a drop in the bucket for the Maple Leafs organization. They'll eat the fine, but it's just kind of silly. Why is it? How is it set up in this fashion? The scheduling doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
No, we
collectively bargain the break with the players, so then give them the break. Don't have this silly situation where a team has got their hand forced, either fly and at a time where it's going to be sketchy to make the game because of unforeseen factors, and then not be adequately prepared to play, or you take this route, just take the penalty.
Would you rather fly, leave at 10:30, get in your airport, get into your hotel at 1:30 at night or 3:30 at night?
Exactly.
To me, it's just I think this might have been just an oversight, but I'll be honest. I don't see it changing.
No.
I don't. Right now, the PA is in flux with looking for a new leader, and Gary's not going to give. And the way Gary negotiates, he's not going to give anything without getting something back.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I think I think it should be, if you play on the 27th, you should be allowed to travel after a certain time on the 26th. And if you leave at 10:30 at night on the 26th, it shouldn't be an issue. But sometimes you need those black and white sort of things. And yeah, as you said, Tyler, it's a drop in the bucket of MLSE, so they don't care.
Now, not so much. This is more of a public shaming thing, but Sheldon Keefe fined $25,000 for actions directed towards the on-ice officials. And which game? I don't know which game it was. It was against St. Louis. I think it was the St. Louis game. Wes McCauley specifically. How it gets to that point, I'm not sure. All I know is that over the years, watching Sheldon Keefe coach the Leafs, is he's had a lot of rope with demonstrative displays protesting the officiating. All coaches do it to some extent. I think Rod Brindamore got in trouble last year for this. Might have been with Wes McCauley as well. But at some point the league is if you keep doubling down and maybe I don't know the inner workings here about whatever Wes McCauley's game report would have said to the league, but at some point it's going to grab their attention. They're going to have to do something, and so that's what's happened here. Leaf fans, obviously are not going to be thrilled with that and think that there's no accountability for the refs. There are measures of accountability for the refs, they're just not public measures of accountability for the refs, and so that makes it seem like there isn't any.
Now, my only question with that is, how the hell did Daryl get off with his comments post game, basically tinfoiling had it, saying that when you go into Toronto, you know what you're going to get?
Yeah. Daryl hasn't been bitching too much lately, so I guess they were willing to cut him some slack on that one. I mean, it's just a silly theory that that he's suggesting there.
Unless the other thing was, the only two that the one I really didn't like, that from just back in that game, just to go on a tangent, I didn't like the Backlund one, and I thought ultimately the Huberdeau and Sandin probably should have got a multi. I would have taken both of them off. Other than that, I didn't think that any of the calls were bad.
If you're nitpicking like that, then that's why
it was very strange though that he would reference his time coaching the Blackhawks like it would seem like
in the
lifetime
fucking ago. 80s.
Like what?
No. Yeah, well,
I mean, come on, man. Like that's just.
I know you drink the Kool-Aid there, Kev. But
no, I didn't like the comment. I was just.
Probably why he wasn't fined for it. It was so absurd and so outrageous that it was just.
But I also wondered if maybe the on ice official, maybe the game day report thought the officiating wasn't good anyway. That was my other theory, but I didn't think it was bad. No. I didn't, I myself.
To me, I feel like that's more undermining the integrity of the game as opposed to just getting demonstratively upset during the game.
Yes. It is reasonable to wonder, what are the appropriate standards here for dealing with the refs.
And Sutter's drinking the Sutter Kool-Aid. He did call out the officials back in 2004, if you remember. He called out the integrity of the game in the final.
So, that always happens. I mean, John Cooper was working officiating there in the final last year too. That's an age-old tradition.
Is not Swedish for punch me in the head.
Yeah. I mean, Brian Burke, calls a press conference, gets everybody down to the media room there to not announce anything, but to just bitch about the officiating and the fairness from the league. Of course, Brian got a heavy fine for that.
Yeah. I would agree with you. Daryl should have got a fine, but it
was a little surprising he didn't get something for that.
Yeah. Tyler, what did you think of the Bunting linesman thing?
I it gets heated out there. It gets I mean, I know it sounds like I'm sticking up for the refs here. It was heavy-handed. Shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't have a situation where you could actually potentially hurt a player by shoving him through the door like that. But you know, the juices flow for the officials too. Got a little, and you know, everything's running pretty fast there. You know, it's a bit of a heated situation that's unfolding, and the linesman used a little bit of force. And he's an ex-player, so he's not wimpy. Caught the guy off balance. I think it's being overblown, but it's also something that you don't want to see your officials getting involved with.
Yeah, fair.
It's always you're always looking for steadiness with the officials and not escalating an already tense situation, and that kind of made that situation a little more tense than it should have been.
Now, I'm just to pick your brain a little bit, because we talked about this, and you mentioned that Keefe has been given a lot of leeway from officials. Do you think that played anything in terms of that conversation? Did that play at all, do you think, or was that just a hit?
I think I mean, it may be just in this case, Wes McCauley was more willing to make an issue with it with the league. Some referees just tolerate it.
Mm. Yeah.
And Wes is a guy that's had a few run-ins with coaches. I think John Cooper, didn't he get ejected last year in a game for just not letting it go with Wes McCauley? I seem to remember something like that. So, certain referees around the league, if you're going to go down that path with them, there is a greater chance of some repercussions there. And Wes is getting slagged on Twitter for all that and for being a baby or whatever, but
I mean, it's
at what point do they? If he doesn't do something and none of the other refs do anything, then what happens with Shelton? Is he walking out on the ice at some point, having a fit? Like,
we're talking about Leafs Twitter, who got upset with Jim Houston for not being enough of a homer. So
yeah,
it's take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Well, and I think for the league, to slap the Leafs coach with a $25,000 fine is a bit more of a. There's the deterrent for all the other coaches too, and that's they're making an example out of him, but it is one that will get everybody's attention because it is Toronto.
Yeah. So we had some history as well. Ovechkin passed Gordie Howe. I think it's a matter of time when he passes Wayne Gretzky for all-time goals. I think we're at that point where that's probably going to happen.
Needs to play past next year into the year after, I think, and keep up the pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 24, 25, I guess this is when we have that conversation.
And what does that make him, 39 or 40? Yeah.
And he signed that for that long, so
I'm rooting for it. I think he can do it. Obviously, he's been very durable throughout his career, and you hope that remains here over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Very classy, by the way. Mark Howe had a message there for Ovi when he got 802 for passing Gordie Howe and moving into second place. That was nice. Kind of a weird one. Empty netter from the boards from long range there, but Ovi did find the net, and they all count the same, right? They don't ask how, they ask how many. Is the saying.
Yeah, exactly.
And good for Ovi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have much else to say about that specific one. I found this fascinating, the amount of conversation this was about it. And I guess it's because it's a first pick, but Alexis Lafreniere was scratched for the Rangers against a couple nights ago. He's only played in this league for he's only 20 years old.
Yeah.
But first overall pick. He's 21 now, actually.
21. Sorry.
Yeah. This is his third season in the league.
It is a results-oriented business, and at some point, even for a guy like him, this is not used to punish the player, right? It's used as a motivational tool. and it's to try and get his attention and turn this thing around. And eventually, if you're not getting it done out there, this is coming. This happens to veterans too, right? Like we've had these conversations with the Canucks this year around certain guys. It's like pretty eye opening. It's like, oh, he's scratched. Well, I mean, Bruce is not trying to punish them; he's trying to wake them up.
Yeah. Ice time is the ultimate of all the analytic stats. Of all the stats we look at,
Yeah,
ice time is the one that tells us a big story of what a coach is thinking.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
the ultimate. I wonder if we were focused on the Rangers as a podcast, would we be having a debate if we should be sending them down to the minors?
No.
Probably not. But that's another tool in the toolbox for an organization to try and get a younger player out of a slump or a cold stretch or whatever phrase.
He's played enough that he'd have to go through waivers anyway. So
there you go.
That's that nullifies.
I didn't
that
realize
option.
he's already not waiver eligible.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that there's sometimes we just put so much on these kids and just let them develop into hockey players, we have all these expectations. Yeah, he's the number one pick, but man, it just takes time to get to become the player that you're going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we're watching a really good example of story of this. I mean, not a first pick, maybe a lot of people thought he would be, but Shane Wright in Seattle, that's clear example of someone that probably he wasn't quite ready. And
the thing is though is that there has to be some sort of standard and expectation that applies to everybody. And so if you're just going to stick with a guy no matter how much he struggles, I think the rest of the team, if you're not winning, it's hard to be buying into what's going on when it's like that.
Yeah, I mean, he had 19 goals last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. We're not looking at him as a bust, are we? I mean,
no. Younger players hit these patches that are rough, and it's hard to get it back on track.
The only reason I think it's his note is maybe I don't think he's a bust, but I do think that there's might be a potential for trade if they get the right offer and they get the player that makes sense for them coming back. Because they are in a win now mode, right?
Yeah.
It's not like they can wait 5 years for him to get into the prime of his career and be a top six forward for them. They need a top six forward now because they've also got Kakko, who's struggled and hasn't really been. He's been inconsistent. Like he's got 9 goals in 37 games this year, so that's not like he's been lighting it up. They've got Philip Sheedle, who, again, 8 goals in 29 games. Like their young players aren't producing for whatever reason, while their top players are finding a way. Their older top end players are.
Yeah. Yep. And you look at that draft, like just to play the other side of this, that draft has Tim Stützle, Lucas Raymond, Cole Perfetti, Anton Lundell, Seth Jarvis, Dylan Holloway, who I think is taking some steps in Edmonton, Dawson Mercer. That's a really good draft too that you have. That's
Byfield's been up and down. Like Stützle's been good, but he's still long way to go. Raymond's been good, long way to go.
Long way to go.
Yeah. And Lundell's been good in a limited role. And I don't think he has been as good as he was last year after they after they made all the changes. Again, Jarvis has looked good, but he's also on a very good team, and it's easy to look good on a good team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, although that you can make that argument against Lafreniere, but yeah, I don't think it's too early to call him a bust, but you look at what the expectations are there, and I think they definitely want significantly more from him, and they need significantly more from him if they're going to be a contender this year.
Yeah. And let's, like, as much as everybody thought that the Rangers were rebuilding and all of that, there are high expectations. That is not a patient place in New York at all, in any sports organization. You know, I mean, Yankees, Mets, all of that. Like, you know what, whatever organization you want to talk about, that is not patient. And then we'll touch on the World Juniors here. I wanted to spend a little bit more because there was a whole. We'll get to Connor Bedard in terms of his actual play, but the Michigan really stirred a lot of people up that the Michigan was attempted against Czechia. This is where I'm kind of sitting at with this. I don't think the Michigan is a hot dog move. Like, I really don't think it is. Like, I think it's legitimately an evolution of Wayne Gretzky's wraparound. Like, it's just,
which was a hot dog move back then.
Yeah.
It's something different.
Kev, I see where I think I know where you're coming from. It is a flashy hot dog move, but that doesn't make it a bad move.
No, it's a legitimate skill move.
But if you're trying to force it and it's not going, you're going to hear about it. It's just like if you're trying to force a Deacon high in the zone and it goes the opposite way, or if you try and force a pass cross ice and it goes the opposite way. The nice thing about the lacrosse goal is that the lacrosse move is that it's in a spot that you're not going to give up an odd man rush the other way unless you completely biff it and throw it down the ice to the other end, and you've got a player, someone out races it. Like, it's a high reward, low risk play.
So my view on this is that I don't see it as. I mean, it's not against the rules. It's not. It's a skill play, but it is hot dogging if you only bring it out against certain competition. And I have a hard time believing that the Canadians, if they were playing the United States or Finland to start the tournament, I have a hard time believing that they would be doing that. If you're going to use that as part of your repertoire, then it needs to be available, and you need to have the stones to be willing to bring it out in any situation, whether that's the overtime of the gold medal game or a pre-competition game or whatever. And it just came across looking like they took Czechia lightly, and that they could try those out and get away with it there. It just didn't look like they took the competition seriously, and I think some of them conceded that afterwards.
And that's on that players, because the Czechs are a lot of people. I saw a couple of people that had the Czechs winning this tournament. So if they were underestimating, that's a damn good team. That Czechia team is not a bad team, and I think it can cause some chaos. They've got the goaltending to do it.
Yeah, they already have caused chaos.
Yeah, they already have. So, like, if they're taking competition lightly, that's an issue to me.
Well, to me, that's a big coaching fail, that they would not have the team sort of dialed into how serious this first game is and how important it is to get off to a good start, right? Now, since then, okay, no problem against Germany and Austria.
Well,
now they got Sweden today, and because you lost that game in regulation against Czechia, now you start looking at the quarterfinals and what the path to a gold medal is going to be, and it's
Czechia
a little harder in theory than it should have been.
Yeah, Czechia beat Germany 8-1, so Czechia is going to win the pool.
Yeah.
So Canada, if Canada and Sweden are playing for a second, I believe.
Yeah, I believe that's Sweden.
If Sweden wins, they can finish first. But
there you go. Yeah.
But if Canada wins, they finish second in that pool.
Yeah. I don't think they lost specifically because they were Michiganing, but I do think that they were outworked by the Czechs. They were outplayed by the Czechs, and that to me didn't look good. And they need to put on a good they need a good win against Sweden here to kind of get themselves back into some good footing to get themselves ready for the medal round. I mean, and really with this tournament, and we've already talked about him. I think there's a lot of feeling here with the expectation with this forward group. You've got a Connor Bedard, you've got a Shane Wright, you got a Logan Stankoven. I think the expectations on this team was gold medal, and I think it'll be fair to say that there's some Canadians that will feel disappointed if that doesn't happen. But yeah, I don't know where everyone is at on that part, and then I'll save for the.
Well, if they're holding the gold medal at the end of this thing, it'll all be a moot point. But and we do in Canada get kind of hung up at times over how it looks as opposed to the end result.
Yeah.
If they had taken a different approach against Czechia and still lost, people would still be like, "How are we losing to Czechia?" So, at the end of the day, it is a bit of a results-oriented thing. But they've rebounded. The concern was that they didn't get off to a good start. They didn't take it seriously, and then that they wouldn't have a response after that. Now, obviously, playing Sweden tonight is going to be a different deal, and the last couple of games have been very easy, but at least they turned it around fairly quickly. I mean, it came right back and hammered Germany in the next game. So, that whole problem was flushed fairly quickly, it seems.
Yeah,
and that whole Group B is a bit of a mess too. Switzerland beat Slovakia in a shootout today. So that throws. I still can't. I'm trying to wrap my head around they could play any number of. Canada could play any one of Slovakia, U.S. or Finland, no matter what the result is tonight in their game.
Looks like,
yeah.
Because if Finland, so right now, Finland and the States are tied 1-1 after one. And if Finland wins, then I think the U.S. finishes third in that division, in that pool. So even if they win, they play the States in the quarters, I believe is how it works.
Yeah, it's 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So... And then if they win and the States win, then they play Slovakia. And the Slovaks,
as much as we like that 3-point game thing, it does make the standings harder to interpret. But
yeah.
But
also the other one thing is there is a bit of a overrated just craziness that comes with the World Juniors. I saw people complaining that that Canada kept their goal song quiet until they got the first goal, which, by the way, great choice for goal song.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. You can see the barn in Halifax is absolutely bumping when everyone's singing along to it.
Yes,
it's great.
I guess we should note too. Nice to see the World Juniors in a junior hockey location, in a junior hockey rink. Looks great, sounds great. And then even for the non-Canada games, I mean, Germany and Austria yesterday, that was, for that matchup, it was still well attended and good atmosphere.
If it ever comes back to Vancouver, it needs to be in the Langley Event Center and some of the smaller rinks. Not at unless it's the gold medal game or the championship game. Sure, put that at Rogers. But I really do think just having the junior atmosphere, I just think just adds so much because it's I don't know.
Well, I mean, the only way it's going to work by trying to fill NHL buildings is they got to drop the ticket prices, and I just don't. That's wishful thinking.
Well, I also think it needs to take at least 2 to 3 years away from Canada and have it somewhere else because I
can't remember for sure, but I know the next one is in Sweden, is it not?
Next one's in Sweden. I don't mind it as long as it's you go East Coast, West Coast type deal, East and West, where it's you have a completely different market.
Yeah.
So otherwise, you get.
To be fair to what happened in Edmonton, I'm not. That was a very awkward situation we were in with COVID and all of that. They had to do it with an empty arena, then they had to postpone it. So I want to be careful how we're criticizing I'm not criticizing Edmonton, but I just think the atmosphere at a junior hockey at a rink just adds so much more to it than these large NHL rinks that are empty, right? That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And I mean, you really couldn't, with COVID, obviously, you couldn't do it at a smaller rink in Edmonton. You kind of needed to confine everything to one area. So that being said, that's what I would prefer.
Yeah.
But,
so
I
I
don't think
believe
there's
the
any.
next. Sorry,
Yeah, the next
next
one's in Gothenburg, Sweden. Next
and
year,
then the next one's in the States. 2025 is in the States.
That I'm trying.
This one was supposed to be Russia. Oh no, they've changed it since then. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, this one was supposed to be in Russia. Canada was supposed to have 2024, but it was swapped with 2022, which Sweden was supposed to have. And then it looks like Canada is supposed to host 2026, 2028, and 2031. But I don't know about 2025. I think there is some interest in the U.S. getting it back, but I haven't heard anything there official.
I'm pretty sure the U.S. is will have it. I don't know if they've announced.
It's been a while since it's been in Europe, though. The last one was in Ostrava in Czechia, I believe.
Yeah.
2020.
You know who needs it? Can I just put a somehow? Can we get it to Latvia?
Yeah, I was like, please say Latvia.
That would be fun, but they're playing for the relegation right now. So
I know.
I think you need to be in a more certain place. I'd like to see it go to Germany at some point. They seem to be.
Oh yes, Germany would. If you could get the German hockey fans hyped for it, they would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Back in it was
the other thing if you put it in Germany, is if you could, for like the ultimate like Christmas hockey tour, you could go watch the Spengler Cup in Switzerland, and then World Juniors in Germany.
Yeah.
Oof.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we need to have a chat about Connor Bedard. I mean, he only had 11 shots.
I guess.
Jacks. I mean,
Stick Tap tying Jordan Eberle's all-time World Junior goal record at 14 goals. So presumably Bedard's going to break that here at some point.
Yeah, his offensive ability is absolutely off the charts. There's no question. Like he is a phenom. No, there's no question about it. It's hard to criticize his offensive game. We'll see. I want to see what he does in the playoffs with the WHL, and I'm not trying to put pressure on him, but I wonder if the Pats can go on a run with this guy if he's playing the way he is. It'll be. I mean, a lot of people are still making these suggestions that the Pats are going to trade Bedard. They could go on a run with him.
Well, they've got him. They've got
Tanner Howe.
They've got that Czechia defenseman too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know his name.
I know who you're talking about, though. Yeah.
Like Regina's seventh right now. They've played a lot more games. They played more games than anyone else. But yeah, if they can get Bedard and that defenseman back and go on a run.
Yeah.
But as long as he performs well, like that's the other thing is like as long as he performs well, he doesn't disappear. If the Pats make the playoffs, which they've got a 6-point lead on Brandon for 8th, and so I think as long as Bedard can carry them there, as long as he plays well. It's not necessarily how deep they go as long as he plays well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to be the number one pick, but I would be interested to see what he can do in a playoff run, just because I want to see that. Because he has the ability to. I think he has the ability to carry a team. I think it's entirely possible with that offensive ability. So, and I think he's learning other aspects of his game. Dave Cameron benched him last World Juniors. Nobody really talked about it, but he was benched. So I think he's learning some other aspects of his game. It's if
I'm trying to remember what World Juniors? Which ones? The summer ones?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he I can't remember the game, but he was benched. But yeah. Well, I guess next time we gather we'll be interested to see what happens with this Canadian team, and hey,
they're good, but not there's once we get to the quarterfinals, it get the difficulty and the pressure and the tension, everything ramps up.
And these other teams are either catching up or passing, or they're starting to develop some really good hockey players. So it's becoming a really good tournament. And Russia not there, I think it opens the door. Feels like a lot of teams feels like that door opened. And just from Sweden's perspective, I mean, they've been so good in the round robin. At some point, you have to think they're going to break through and win a championship.
I was just thinking about that myself. It's like, is this the year that Sweden gets a breakthrough?
Yeah.
We'll find out. Yeah. Well, this has been fun, gentlemen.
Yes. I don't think there's anything else we need to talk about. Is there anything we missed?
Well, I think there's the one, like the Tyler, what did you think of that the couple headshots that were called throughout this tournament?
Well, people have to remember to get their minds around the fact that it's an amateur hockey tournament, and it's getting pretty soft for some of us older school types that are used to seeing hockey a certain way from a time long ago. But no, they've kind of have to have that mandate of being strict with everything. It's an amateur hockey event. They're not professionals yet, and head injuries, the abundance of caution, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if it weren't like this, people would something would come up and people would be like, "What WTF?" So they're taking the safe route. It seems a little extreme sometimes, but no, basically anything that's head contact is going to be called with very heavy enforcement. And I've seen some people make the comment like, "Well, just take hitting out of the game." It's like, well, I don't know, maybe down the road that does happen. It would be sad, right? But I mean, it's kind of trending in that direction, isn't it?
I see. Like when I was calling play-by-play last year, like the amount of headshot penalties that were being called, checking type penalties that were being called, it made me wonder. But at the same time,
the refs to be pretty crazy with that. Like that's being pushed. That's definitely being pushed.
But I still think there's going to be a pushback. I heard Bob Stauffer last night watching that Oilers Kraken game. Bob Stauffer said one of the things that he thinks the Oilers need is a Curtis McDermott type of player that plays 6 to 8 minutes, roams around the ice, and causes a little bit of
the Ryan
fear.
Reeves.
Yep, and look what Minnesota's been since Ryan Reeves put on a Minnesota Wild jersey. They've certainly turned around. So I think there's still going to be resistance from this in the NHL for a while, but I wonder in 10 years where we're at in terms of what the game of checking is like.
Yeah, see, it's the NHL is an entertainment product, though, right? Like the World Junior Championship, although TSN presents it as an entertainment product, and it has that feel to it when you watch it on TV. It's still an amateur hockey tournament.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the difference in approach that has to be taken there with the refereeing and suspensions and dealing with head contact.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it there, Tyler.
Yeah.
Even though I did feel like the one on Zach Dean was very, very soft, because I feel like he barely got head contact, and most of it was like incidental, and the reason the guy was cut was because of his visor.
Yeah.
But at least they're being consistent with it, because it's in the hit.
It's
on
very careful what you wish for when you want to start stepping into taking the lenient approach.
Yeah. For me, it's always when I talk about officiating, it's consistency, right?
Yeah.
So, which always is a frustration.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it there. as we head into 2023. We'll play a game next time called Likely or Unlikely. Well, for next one. So just a heads up on that. But we'll leave it for our next one. And I still have a weird schedule, but we'll figure that out. But how do we follow everyone?
I am Bearded Connect 03 on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
Devin, who's out and about in this earth, I think we're
Somewhere.
somewhere on this earth. Gordhouse09. We miss him. Chris has been touring the world as well. SCHNEIDZ. I am KEVOLE on Shifts and Pucks, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. Thanks, everyone. And I'm allowed to say it this way because it's 2022 and the end of 2022, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for listening throughout the entire year. We hope you all come back in 2023, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.